Welcome to another episode of the Sipping and Tripping podcast, where we connect with amazing people. Today's conversation is all about being a voice for the voiceless. I am your host, Desmond Black, and the person that's sipping and tripping with me today is none other than Miss Brooke Trometer. How you doing? How you doing today? How was your week so far?
Oh, it's going well. I'm doing good, and this week's just been busy and having fun with the kids.
Yeah. At least try to have fun with the kids.
Oh yeah.
um,
Yep.
um, so, um, are you married?
Yes, I am. I have a husband and I have two kids, two daughters. One is 21 and the other is 11. So,
21 and 11. Okay,
yeah.
so that's a little gap. How they get along?
Oh, wonderfully. Oh my goodness. They're like two peas in a pod. I don't know what I'd have
That's
done if I had had kids really close together. I have to give all the admiration in the world to moms and dads that have them where there's a kid in diapers and they're potty training another one. Because I think
yeah.
I've gone crazy.
So I'm right there. I got 11-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a soon to be 2-year-old. So
Oh wow, yeah. See, man, bless you. It's like bless you.
yeah, and it's crazy. Like I was saying, like it's our intent to have fun with the kids, but when you have
Mhm.
kids that just don't get along with each other, it
Mm,
makes it very difficult. Because my kids, all they do is argue, and you separate them. And the thing is, they don't want to be separated. They complain, say, "I want my brother, I want my sister," but then
yeah,
2 minutes into them being together is just yelling, arguing, and it
they
sounds
are.
like they deconstructing the room and putting holes in walls and breaking furniture. I'm like, this is crazy. So
Yeah.
it's very important for them to understand the value behind things in life. But I don't
Mhm.
know. One of these days, I guess they'll get there.
Oh, they'll get there eventually. It's yeah, my whole family kind of has really big age gaps. And
Right,
I think that makes a big difference too. My brother and I are like 8.5 years apart. My mom and her siblings all have 10 to 8 years between them. Um, so yeah, it's kind of like just big age gaps. And so I think it makes a difference because you have a different relationship with your siblings when you have
right,
that kind of a gap, right? You're not, I think there's a difference. Like you're not competing for the same kind of attention with mom and dad
right,
as you are when you're so close together in age. So I think that makes a big difference. And my two, um, it's they're sisters, of course, but there's also a little bit of kind of, I don't know how to put it because she doesn't parent her sister, but there is
right,
still kind of that kind of a parental kind of style to their relationship, you know?
right, right, right.
It's not like your typical sibling dynamic. So, but yeah, no, they get along great. Like she'll tell her sister, "Hey, I want to go hang out. I want to, spend some time with you." And her sister takes the time. Like they'll go to the mall or they'll go ice skating or she spends the time. She still lives with me. My 21-year-old does. So
Okay.
she's still here. I mean, she takes care of herself. She pays her rent. She pays her car payment. She's all self-sufficient, but she's like, in this economy, I'd have to have a roommate anyway. She's like, so if you guys are cool with it, I'd rather just live with y'all because I like you and I know how to live with you.
Yeah, I know that's right. Ain't nothing wrong with that because it is hard. It's hard for any single parent or any single person to survive on their own. It's hard to be with somebody and make ends meet. Because it's a lot of jobs that's paying that much money where you can be like, okay, I'm saying this on my own. And then so a lot of people that are in relationships, they might say they live comfortably, but really they don't. They stress too. Because it's very hard out here, very
It's
hard.
tough.
They might just be getting by, and that's why another thing that's very important is money management. Because if you want to
Oh,
take vacations and stuff, you can do that. You just got
mhm.
to manage your money a little bit better. But
That's right.
when you was talking about like the age gap, so I'm one of five. I
Oh
got
boy.
I got four brothers. So I have a brother that's a year younger than me. I have one that's 4 years older than me, one's 9 years, and one's like 10 years older than me. So it's a little
Wow.
age difference right there, except for
Yeah.
me and my younger brother. Like, we the closest in age, but
Yeah.
yeah, so I get it. And the thing is, the one thing the one takeaway is this about the age gap thing is, they have that time to themselves to grow and learn things and experience things so they can in turn share those experiences with you and try to help mold you and take the load off our parents and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
that's the one positive, because when they close the age, now they try to learn together.
Oh
right?
yeah.
And then the parents trying to teach them together instead of teaching them individually, because you can't when they close to age. So that makes it hard too. So
Absolutely.
I got you.
Yeah, for sure.
So we mentioned you being married. How long have you been married?
We've been married for, let's see, this year will be 16 years that we've been married.
60?
Yeah.
That's longevity right there. So okay. So how quickly did you get married after dating?
Let's see. We started dating. So our marriage that would have been September. Let's see. What would that be? 14 months after we started dating.
Okay.
So, yeah, 14 months after. So my oldest daughter is from my first marriage. But my second husband, my now husband, he took her as his own, like, right off the bat. So it was, her dad wasn't around quite as much, and he just picked her right on up and is like, yep, okay, yep, no, she comes with you, package deal, love her to pieces, and there you go. And but yeah, no, we got married about 14 months after we started dating each other. So yeah.
Yeah, y'all must have hit it off real good there, because 14 months. I know from my past experiences, we still just getting to know each other at 14 months.
Well,
unfortunately.
So the funny thing is that we actually kind of knew each other prior to us dating. So we were friends before we started dating each other. So we had met. He was my mechanic at the shop that my car went to. So every time I took my car in for an oil change, every time that I needed something done with the tires or the air filter or any of those things that needed done with my car, it all went to the mechanic shop. And he was the manager of the shop there. And so I had known him since I think right around the time I got pregnant with my first daughter. So like I knew him back then. And yeah, and then after I got my divorce, we started dating probably, I want to say it was probably about a year after my divorce that we started dating each other. And yeah, and then it just kind of went from there. So we kind of knew each other prior to that. It's just we didn't have like the romantic relationship aspect of it. So
got you. I see, that's a little different, because all that helps. Okay. Yeah. As opposed to just meeting somebody. But okay. So you have your own podcast, correct?
Yeah, I do. Built on Behavior.
You said built on, okay. And where can we find that?
That is on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, pretty well anywhere that you can have a podcast. It's there.
I got you. Yeah. Now, I already subscribed to you. I just, wanted you to put it out there for the viewers, so that they can tap in as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you have any siblings?
I have a brother, a half brother. And we're pretty close. Yep. He's about 8.5 years different, age different than me. And yeah, so he is when he was a kid, we always because of that big age gap, we kind of had a relationship a lot like my two kids do. And when I moved out of the house, he was still in middle school. And I think he was in 5th grade, something like that. So I'd pick him up. I had a day every week. I'd pick him up from school every Tuesday, and we would go and we'd go have lunch. I'd take him over. He liked, had a thing for like the Pokemon and the Yu-Gi-Oh cards and stuff like that. So I'd take him over to one of the card shops and get him a new pack of cards, and we'd hang out and play with them and all of that. So yeah, so we got a pretty good relationship.
That's good. Me and my brothers, we've had a good relationship, but the one thing that we just got together last week and decided to do is to be more involved, to be more active, you know, to communicate more, to pick up the phone and call each other
Mhm.
and plan to do things together. So, you know, that's moving in the right direction. So that's good because it's very important. That's one thing I've been trying to instill in my kids. So it's good for us to come together like this and make
Mhm.
these plans amongst each other because our kids are going to grow up and they're going to, you know, like my older brothers, their kids, they're grown now, but me and my
Mhm.
younger brother, our kids are still young, but it's good for their development, this right? Because
Yeah,
kids are like sponges, so the more they see, the more they'll do, right? And that's the belief,
absolutely.
anyways.
Well, and I think it's important this day and time too. I mean, life moves so fast, and we're expected to just move that fast all the time. You try to slow down, and I don't know, it has a stigma attached to it anymore. If you try to slow down, it's like, looked at negatively. But I think this day and time, we have to really teach our kids as well as kind of like train ourselves again to be really intentional with the relationships that we have, and not just in
Correct.
like our romantic relationships, but our family relationships, our friends, our, the people that we care about, just to sit there and be like, you know what, no, we're actually going to make the time, put it on the calendar, to spend some time together, to call each other, to, just shoot, you just thinking about them, and have a happy memory of somebody or something like that, just to shoot the text message over and go like, you know what, man, I was thinking about you,
Right,
put a
right.
smile on my face
Yep,
today, you know and,
absolutely.
yeah.
And you know, another thing me and my brothers was talking about, you know, for birthdays, we ain't saying you got to give like the most extravagant gift, right? But
Hmm.
even if it's $5, $10, because I guess the thought that counts, and then especially when you family, it should never be about the dollar amount. You know,
Absolutely.
it's just personable just to send a gift of some
Hmm.
sort. I don't
Right.
care if it's a tie or gloves or something like that. So that's something we discuss. So that's
Yeah.
exciting. So you know, moving forward, we'll see. You know, but I know we'll stick to it. You know, it's very important. Um, so yeah, where did you grow up and or where you from and where did you grow up?
So funny enough, I am still where I grew up.
Oh,
So I'm right here in Florida, Southwest Florida. So I've grown up here my whole life. I'm fifth generation right here. So my family's pretty tied deep into this area. I've watched it go from being nothing but a little podunk town to blowing up into this big metropolis, which has sadly occurred.
I'm sorry.
But yeah, no, it's we have pretty deep ties here. And my family was, going back generations, had been like cattle, dealt with cattle and farmland, and different things along those lines. And little by little, it just kind of came out. And my dad still works in wildlife, works in wildlife management. He's up in another part of Florida now, up in North Florida, but he does that, and that all just kind of instilled that love of being with the animals and being around and having them in our lives, which we had talked about a little bit. We have our goats and our chickens and ducks, and our little bit of farm area here. And yeah, so that's kind of what I've done, and I can't imagine not having that little bit of country life still sitting around here for us.
Yeah, yo, oddly enough, like you know, at one point in my life, like when I was younger, I used to say I wanted a huge farm because I had this
Mhm.
love for animals as well. Like you know,
Yeah.
growing up, you see like National Geographic and just in magazines or a lot of the
Mhm.
cartoons had a lot of animals and like you see the giraffes and I
Mhm.
always when since childhood I always said I wanted a pet koala bear because like you see them on
Yeah.
movies and stuff they're intelligent like monkeys koala bears they're actually
Yeah.
intelligent and a lot of people don't know that like they could do everything a human could do. It's
Mhm.
insane. So I
Yep.
don't know. It was always something about a koala bear. I said I wanted one of those. It used to be like a tiger or lion, but then as you get
Mhm.
older, you might them things is dangerous. Even the
Really
ones
big.
that's trained, I would not be able to trust it, and it gets so big. So
Yep. Yep.
who wants that?
Hey,
So
look, I
and then
still.
like
Oh, go ahead.
go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say I still have a little bit of that. I just shrunk the big cat down to where I'm kind of like, you know what, a serval wouldn't be too bad. And my husband is like, no, it's like
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
good.
yeah. And like I get, ain't nothing wrong with that. And especially, you know, another thing that turned me on the animals. You know, Michael Jackson used to have
Yep.
other animals. And
Neverland.
I was like,
Mhm.
that's crazy how a human can actually have that at their house. So it's
Yep.
crazy.
Oh yeah.
And so speaking about your kids, right? You said you homeschooled your kids, right?
Yeah. Yep. I do.
So what what uh what made you choose homeschooling over your traditional schooling?
Yeah. So initially it was out of necessity versus anything. And then it just kind of turned into like, this is really just makes sense. The necessity of it was my oldest, um, come to find out as she got older, which we didn't know it at the time, but as she got older, she tested and has had a genius IQ. And so she learned very, very quickly, which meant by the time that she was like 4 years old, I mean, she's having full on conversations with you. She's doing, simple addition. She's reading. She's, all of these things that she was already there. And so I was like, well, all right, we're going to put her in this little private school that was, close by. It was kind of, a little hybrid version. You'd be in school 3 days, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. And then the teachers would send like the school lessons home with you to do with your kid on Tuesday and Thursday. So that's what we were doing. But because she knew all the things that she needed to know for kindergarten, being a private school, they were like, okay, well, then just we'll put her in kindergarten because her birthday falls the end of September. So for public school, they would have held her back a year because her birthday fell later in the year, right? But the private school was like, nope, we'll go ahead and we'll let her start. So we did. And then they started their kindergartners in a first grade curriculum. So in essence, she was 4 years old doing first grade work. And after that first year that she was in there, we kind of had a little bit of a falling out with the school in regards to their religious aspects of everything. We're Christian, we believe all of that stuff, but it was some of the things that they were really pushing that we were just like, that's not what we're, lining up with. And so I pulled her out of the school and I was going to put her into a different private school, but they're like, well, she would be going into first grade doing first grade work. So she'd be essentially repeating the work that she had already done. And I'm like, well, is there any way to pull her out, and put her in like second grade reading and math, but keep her in like first grade with the other kids so she's not getting thrown with kids that are so much older than her, because at that age, the age gap emotionally, there's a lot of difference. There's a bunch of growth in that period of time. So 2 years is still a big difference. And they're like, nope, we can't do that. I'm like, okay. So public school would have pulled her and put her back in kindergarten because of the age. And she'd have been doing kindergarten work, which was below what she had already done. So I'm like, okay, so we're just going to go ahead and homeschool, right now. That way I can just put her into the curriculum that she needs to be in, the grade level she needs to be in. And, we stayed involved in other activities like 4-H, and she did group figure skating lessons, and she did some other things like that to keep her, with other kids and social. And then as we got going, it was just kind of like, okay, this just really makes a lot more sense because the things that she's interested in, I can focus her on and not just be made to go generic, because when you have like 30 kids in a class, a teacher can't sit there and say, oh, you like animals. Let's take your math and your English and your science and let's gear it that way. You're still learning all of the same things. We're just focusing on, the topic that you're interested in to make it more of what you want, more what you want to do. And, this one over here likes planes. You can focus over there on planes. When you're in a class like that, it's just, you can't do that. I mean, it's just not practical. And for her, I was just like, well, that just makes way more sense to be able to do it this way. So that's what we started doing. And it just worked really, really well for her when she got into 4-H more. we were able to take and just combine different things with what she was doing with her animals and government and art. And then like history, I was like, shoot, you know, you can look at a lot of stuff in the book, but man, it makes so much more sense if you can touch it and be tangible, right?
Right.
So we just planned our family vacations around what we were studying in history, like American history. So we just went to the place, you
Right.
know? And so that was, it just seemed to be make way more sense for us to do it like that. And I worked from home. So, and teaching music and things like that. So I was able to work around all of it. I was, you know, it was something that we had the privilege of being able to do. And then as time went on, it worked so well with her that when my younger daughter was born, it was like, well, we're just going to kind of do the same thing. And it's just worked out really beautifully.
So that's the thing. I've always heard of people doing the homeschooling thing, but like, how does it work as far as like curriculum? You get that from the school, or is it something you put together yourself?
Yeah. So every state has different laws about it. So in Florida, you can essentially kind of create your own curriculum, even if you want to, pulling it together from different areas. You put it together, and throughout the year, like you send a letter of intent to the school board to tell them that you're going to homeschool your child. And then basically at the end of the year, you're keeping track of samples of the schoolwork that your child is doing throughout the year. And then you have to have like a certified teacher or something along those lines review the samples of work that you've done to show progression throughout the year.
Right.
And then that teacher can say, yes, this is acceptable progression for the year. And they sign a form saying, yep, they've done acceptable amount of work, made acceptable progression, and then that gets sent back into the school board. And you're good there. But Florida has Florida Virtual, which is through the state. It's kind of their homeschool curriculum that you can do online. But then there's other curriculums that you can get through, like, you know, Abeka is one of them, Heritage. Those are some of the bigger ones. But there's so many smaller curriculum programs that you can pull around as well. You can end up saying, I like the math curriculum over here with this program, but I like the way that they do English over here. So I'm going to take the math from this one. I'm going to take the English from this one. I'm going to take the history from over here and put it together. So you can kind of like do those things and kind of really gear it to what your child needs too. So like my youngest daughter, she struggled a lot with like her math facts, of being able to just look at a piece of paper and it say 5 + 3 is 8, right? Written out just straight up. Did not make sense to this kid. Now my oldest kid got that stuff like this. Her, not so much. Struggled with it for so long. But if I sat there and I had, like, there's 5 cookies on this plate and there's 3 cookies on this plate, and I asked her, I said, well, okay, so there's 5 cookies over here and there's 3 cookies here. If I eat all those cookies, how many cookies did I eat? Immediately she would tell me 8. But it was in like a real life situation. It wasn't just numbers on a page. So if I put it in like real life situation, she'd get it. But if I turned around and I put it very just math facts, did not get it. So it took her a while to get to where her brain was working that way. So like in regular school, they would have held her back on almost everything because of that. Whereas with homeschooling, I could take my time with her and let her learn at a slower pace in math without holding her back in reading, which she is a grade level ahead on because she understands, you know, her reading skills are great. So she can continue to excel at these other subjects that she's really, really good at, take her time on the math until her brain clicked with it. Then when her brain clicked with it, now here we are, boom, 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 boom. And we're in 6th grade math now up to grade level. But it, you know, she wouldn't have had that opportunity in regular school if she had done that. So, yeah.
So that's amazing. It sounds like a lot of hard work, but the one thing that from listening to you that I think that I would like and appreciate from that whole experience is this. homeschooling your kids and going through a curriculum like that, it's not just teaching your kids, it's also a refresher for yourself.
That is
Because
true. That is true. Yeah.
I know as we get older, our kids bring us some homework. Like, can you help us? We like, oh, they be like, didn't you go to school? Like, kids love to say that too. Didn't you go to school? Like, dang, why you?
The last time that we had to factor a number, it was like,
yeah, my son brought me homework, and he asked me, and I was like, you gotta give me a minute, because this is different, and then it's also different, like, not at his age, but as you get older, like, let's see, I graduated in 04. We only had to have 3 years of math. But like 2 years after me, they changed the law to you have to have 4 years of math. So I said, oh, I feel bad for y'all, because you have to do like trigonometry or something like that, or calculus. Whereas that was intimidating. The thought of that was intimidating to me when I was in school. I was like, I'm glad I ain't got to do that. Just algebra 1, algebra 2, and geometry. And speaking about, and it's crazy because a lot of people, they was like, geometry is hard. But for some reason, for me, geometry was so much simpler than algebra. And I think it's had to do with like shapes and stuff, because I can draw, right? And I was always building things and deconstructing things. And geometry, the thought of geometry was intimidating to me. But all my teachers used to tell me, you'll do fine. You like to draw. It's fine. Just look at it like a picture. And once I started doing that and just, applying certain techniques, I just found it was easy. The only difficulty that I had with geometry is proofs, right? You're familiar with the proofs, like where you got to work backwards or work from the middle of the project and come up with the beginning and the end. It's like sometimes that got a little tricky. I think it was called like the SATs and stuff, or the end of the school year thing. That used to kill me. That was exhausting.
Yes.
But
I made it through though. Oh, yeah. No, for sure. Yeah, no, I was the same way. I struggled a lot when it came to algebra. Algebra, for whatever reason, didn't make that much sense to me, but geometry, I was like you, like, man, I got the geometry. And then now the funny thing was, so like in school itself, I always had the highest grades in like English and reading. I was almost always A's in English and reading. Struggled with my math scores, always. Now, but when I would take a standardized test, it was flipped, always flipped. On the standardized test, I would always score really high in math, and I would like barely pass the English. And I'm like, how does that work?
Right.
I don't understand that.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, so like you said with your kids, it's like we learn differently. We look at things differently. I know for me, my favorite subject in school has always been English and creative writing. I've always liked to come up write my own stories. So I used to thrive in doing essays where everybody else ran away from essays. I was like, oh yeah, essay, I'll take that any day. So English and creative writing was always my thing. So
now, I liked English, but I liked creative writing. I struggled with because I'm coming up with the ideas just like out of thin air was always hard for me. But I loved research projects. And you sit there, you tell me to do that and let me write a research paper. I'm like, ooh, I'm going to write the research paper of a lifetime. It's like,
The same thing with me, because that's one thing I picked up from my father is intellect, intelligence. Like I always wanted to be knowledgeable about as much as I could. So research papers, I thrived in that too. I went above and beyond. And some people used to be like, it's a simple homework assignment. Why are you going so deep? But again, it's just something I enjoyed doing. So whenever you have that kind of enjoyment doing something educational, that's always a plus.
Well, and that's what and I've always told my kids and I've always told my students, I'm like, the one thing, you can earn money and you can lose it. You can have friends and you can lose them. You can have a big house and you can lose it. You can have your car, you can lose it. You can have, anything and lose it. Right. But the one thing that you can get that is always free and you can never lose is knowledge.
It's powerful.
You can knowledge is free. The library's free. You know, you can go and read, you can go look stuff up on the internet, you can, you know, it's all there. It's free to get, and no one can take it from you. Once it's locked up here, it's yours.
Mm,
No one can
right,
take it.
right. Yeah, I love to read. Like, you know, I've always liked to read. That's always been one of my things. Like I have plenty of books, and it's like sometimes with me is I start a book and I might be in Barnes and Noble or something like that,
Mhm.
or I'll be out somewhere and a book catch my attention. Then I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, now I immediately want to jump to that, but I got three other books I haven't started, so that's something I'm trying to get away from because some books I like to take notes on. I buy a notebook and I read it and I
Yep.
take notes, and then what happens is the lines start getting blurred sometimes. I'm reading this book, I'm reading that book, and sometimes I'll be trying to convey the overall message or interpretation to somebody, but I'll be blurring the lines. They're like, I don't
Yeah.
think you talk about the same thing. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. But
Right. Yeah.
like this one book I got is very good, and I actually wanted to do some podcast discussions about it. It's called it's called Why We Love, right? It's
Mhm.
the nature and chemistry of romantic love. And
Mhm.
I've read that book twice, and I thought it was great. It's this woman that she has a PhD, and her husband is a medical doctor. So
Mhm.
he assisted her in writing the book. So yeah, so it breaks down everything. The percentage of the woman's brain versus the man's brain, or what they think about, what they focus on, you know.
Mhm.
So I've learned a lot through that. Like I always try to learn as much as I can about a woman anyway. So that book gave me a lot of insight on a woman.
Mhm.
Like you guys deal with more of a visual thing than men.
Mhm.
You're more a conversationalist than men. Like once you have a woman's mental, you have everything. And I like to tell people that all the time. Like
Yep.
engaging conversation, because once you have that and you got her attention that way,
Yep.
then you most likely gonna have everything after that. But men is a little
Absolutely.
different. We're a little bit more simple. Like
Mhm.
we think about the wrong thing, so the wrong thing catches our attention. Now we
Yeah.
and we think
Yeah.
we like you, we think we love you, we think you know what I'm saying, but it's not the case.
Yep.
So women are more strategic than men, so it is
Yeah.
what it is.
For sure. Have you read the one that's like the five love languages?
No, I did write. I'm gonna write it down again because somebody told me to read that, and I just haven't. I know what the five love languages are, but I just never
Mhm.
read the book.
I think it's pretty
Um,
interesting because that was one that where I think it was initially like intended for like, you know, romantic relationships, but the concepts apply to pretty well every relationship, you
right,
know, to all of them. And I remember my oldest daughter, like I said, a lot of times with really high intellect comes very low emotional intelligence. Um,
hmm.
so that's typically kind of what happens. The higher the IQ, the lower the EQ tends to be.
I didn't know that. See, that's
Yeah.
good. I like that.
And so well, they just end up looking at things like very matter of factly.
Hmm.
And it's like, well, but like, is it like, as an example, she had, it's just one that always sticks out in my mind because when she told me about it, and I was kind of like, wait, what? Why did you say that? I'm like, you know, but
Right,
she had a friend that, in one of the groups that they were in, somebody was teasing this one friend of hers about, oh, you're anorexic, you're this, you're that, because she was just really, really skinny. And the
right,
girl got really upset, was crying about it because I guess like her family teases her about being really skinny and things like that at home. And she went to my daughter to like vent and like talk to her about it. And my daughter's like, well, I don't understand why you're upset about it. It's not true. And
right.
I'm like, I just said, I'm like, why did you say that? And I'm like,
Yeah,
she was like 13 at the time. So it's not like she was like an adult saying this, you know, but she's like 12, 13 at the time. But it was like, you know, just very matter of fact. It's like, but it's not true. So I don't understand why you're upset,
right,
you
right,
know, kind of thing. And so anyway, as we were, you know, if things didn't make sense to her, then it just, well, I don't understand how it doesn't make, you know, why you feel this way because I don't feel this way. I
right.
see it this way. I don't understand how you see it any other way. And so when I started trying to like talk to her more about stuff, I started bringing up this love language book because I had read it And I started bringing up these different things and these different ways of people are communicating and how they feel different things and how they, and it allowed for us to sit down one night and we really talked. And I was able to explain to her, like, I'm a very much a physical touch person and quality time. And for her, she is, and I always thought that this was so shallow when people would say this, but she is a gift person. She feels loved by getting gifts and by giving gifts. So to me, for me, super materialistic. I'm like, I can't be bought. That's, my love can't be bought. That's how I've always viewed that. Well, as we sat down with this and we really started talking about these love languages and like what they mean to people, and I started explaining why, I feel the way I feel and how the quality time and the physical touch and the things like that made me feel and why they made me feel the way they do. I finally got out of her what it was about gifts. And she's even told me, she's like, it doesn't have to cost anything. It's not the money behind it. She said, it's the fact that somebody cared enough about me to still be thinking about me when I'm not in front of them.
Right.
And that's what it was, because it's the thing that she feels that, like, if she's not directly in front of somebody, then why would anybody think about her? Why would anybody care enough to keep her in their mind if she's not right there with them?
Right.
But if you're thinking of her when she's not there, you bought a little trinket for her, or like I learned that even this, it's not even so much a physical thing. She loves things like snakes and reptiles and stuff like that. So I learned that I see a snake at a tree, I can snap a picture of that and text it to her and say, oh, look what I saw. I thought of you. And to her, that's a gift, but
it's personable.
It's personable. It's because I thought of her when she wasn't with me. And that means that she meant enough to stay in the forefront of my mind.
I got you. Yeah. So it's crazy. You mentioned physical touch. So, like, a lot of people ask me that question, what's your love language? And I think if I had to choose one before all others, I probably would say physical touch first. But I also feel like they're almost all five of them are about equal for me. Because just how my childhood was, it's things that that was lacking in my childhood. That closeness, that hug, and that kiss goodnight, or that reassurance was always lacking. So for me, I think like physical touch is very important. I know in relationships, I required it. When I didn't get it, I kind of felt like we were estranged, for lack of better words. I felt like I wasn't wanted or appreciated or valued, So physical touch would definitely be my number one. But it's pretty much all five in one, all in one. Because, like I said, that comes with people that have abandonment issues and stuff like that, So, and it's like my mom and my father, they wasn't meant to be together, and it's not like I wanted them to be together, but it's like my father had his life, my mom had her life. My mom was very young when she had kids, 15, 16, 22, 25, 26, So her childhood was null and void because she was pregnant and she had to grow up faster than she should have. So she has her own traumas and her own difficulties in life. And so a lot of times, me and her bump heads, and I have to remind myself of the traumas that she had to endure growing up. And for lack of better words, give her a pass. I'm like, okay, she's acting like this towards me because she's still hurting herself. Because I know my mom be hurting all the time. I can just see it. Her her aura is not radiant. It's just like it's like a black cloud most of the time. So I know that, and I recognize that. So a lot of times, she might tick me off, but like I'll come back and even if I don't feel like I'm wrong, I apologize, because not just apologizing for whatever we just went through, but because of everything she had to endure as a Black woman anyways in life, because I know her life wasn't easy. She was married at 16, she was kicked out at 15 out of her house, so she had to grow up faster than a child should, so later on in life, it's almost like she tried to like go back in time and live the life she should have, right? Because I know later on in age, in our 40s and 50s, she was
Yeah.
doing things that she should have been doing in her teenage years, and people look at her like, "What are you doing here?" But
Yeah.
the psyche, the mind is a very powerful thing, and if you lose sight of that, then that's how people become crazy,
Yeah.
so we have to have compassion and empathy and the wherewithal to understand those things to be able to help others,
Yeah.
so
But that's a really high emotional intelligence on your part and a lot of growth on your part to be able to see that. And I think there's a thing that we can do too of like you said, going and apologizing. It's not so much necessarily, I think that we have to apologize sometimes for how we felt, but
right,
for how things came across or
right,
how the situation devolved. Like my mom used to tell me, she's like, I'm not sorry for what I said, but I'm sorry for how I said it.
right,
I'm not sorry for you know, the what was meant by it, but I could have handled that situation differently. And I'm sorry that I didn't take these things into account during that.
right.
So I think that's really shows a lot of emotional growth on your part, and
and
especially,
and, and and I appreciate you for saying that, because I feel like that for myself. I've come a long way, and one of the hardest things for me to deal with and cope with in life is the fact that like a lot of things that I do
mm,
goes unnoticed. I struggle with that tremendously. When people sit there and say you're the same person you was 10 years ago or 20 years ago, it actually hurts me. And when I vent to people, they be like, why does it matter? Because it matters to me because my upbringing, like there's a lot of
mhm,
voids that was in my life, a lot of mental traumas and stuff in my life. That
mhm.
not feeling loved and stuff like that. Like not just women, everybody on God's green earth wants to feel um, wanted,
Yeah.
loved, appreciated, and all these things. So when you grow up
Mhm,
and you don't feel that, it kind of makes you numb, and it kind of
mhm,
makes you feel like it's you against the world against you, and that's how I grew up. So it
mhm,
put like a hard shell around my heart for a long time, and a lot of
mhm.
people looked at me like, "Oh, you're always mad, you're always angry." Well, I did grow up with a lot of anger and resentment and rage. It's because of my upbringing. So I appreciate you for recognizing that and saying that on
Yeah.
this platform because a lot of people don't say it. And then
Yeah.
when sometimes when I speak about it, they brush it off like, nah, that's not
Yeah.
true. And I'm like, that's insane. I've hit a lot of milestones and I made a lot of I was successful in a lot of things and I'm still
Mhm,
successful. I might not be where I want to be, but it's like I keep growing and I keep
mhm,
progressing. And I feel like why shouldn't I get credit for that? So I
mhm.
appreciate you again.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It should be recognized when it's there. I mean,
Right,
there's so many people that they can't see past themselves, you
right,
know? And that's such a hard place to get to, but like you're saying, it's like we do, and it's human nature to need those things that you're talking about. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And
mhm,
that is a pyramid of basically the things that people need to be able to self actualize. And like the very beginning of it is, you have survival. And survival is just like your bare minimum. Do you have a place to live? Do you have food to eat? Do you have water? Do you have, the bare minimum to survive, right? And
right,
then, there's security. After you have bare minimum to survive, do you have security? Is there safety, around what you have? And then that goes up into belonging after that, as an
right,
essential piece. And if we don't have that sense of belonging, it becomes very difficult to move on up, and lift ourselves further, further up in life, and
right,
propel ourselves forward. And that there's more to life than just trying to survive. And what is it? I like what Kevin Hart called it. What was it? Sir
right,
thriving.
right,
And
right,
it's more than just surviving, you're Sir thriving, you
right,
know
right, right,
and when you can see past yourself and you can see other people and see what they've gone through and have that kind of empathy to go along with it, that's things that so many people never get to.
Right. And I think that's one of the reasons why I like reading so much. I like anything that's going to strengthen my mindset, right? And
Mhm,
that's why I love thought-provoking conversations. Because I really take solace in the fact that like just about any conversation I can jump in and hold my own. And that's
mhm.
another that's a trait that I got from my father, because a lot of times I get in conversations and people will say, "Well, I didn't know you was intelligent like that. Or I didn't know you can go there. I didn't know you could dig deep like that."
Yeah.
So just to get that affirmation from somebody,
Mhm.
it's yeah, I take it to heart. I love it, and I puts a big smile on my face, and it just motivates me to keep going.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I am a positive person and uplifting. I'm all about uplifting people and encouraging people and trying to make the next one better.
I
Because again, I wanted that growing up, and I didn't have it. So now I'm like, I don't want people to go through what I had to go through. So
yeah.
it's emotional maturity. That's all.
Yeah.
I don't know how
100%.
else to put it. So
100%. Absolutely. Yeah.
now on this platform, I like to conversate, educate, and entertain. I usually say that in the beginning, but with that being said, like I just want to know a little bit more about your background and what and your life story. So, anything
Sure.
you want to share about that?
Oh, let's see. So, yeah, so like you said, I was born here in Florida. Um, and my parents divorced when I was about 4 years old and split up. And that was a pretty tumultuous, it wasn't pleasant by any stretch of the imagination. We had many times that the cops were called, and it wasn't a pretty sight. And then eventually, I mean, there's things that I won't quite say on here because people are alive and around, um,
Gotcha.
you know, on things. But yeah, so I grew up. Initially, was in a private school, small little private school for a while. Ended up then going from a school that had like I don't know, like 143 students from kindergarten to eighth grade, in the whole
Mm,
school to a public high school that had, you know, like 2,000 kids in the whole school, in four grade levels. So that was quite an adjustment. And yeah, I mean, I grew up in a rural, kind of rural community, got married, had my first daughter. Our relationship, my ex-husband and I was not great either. That was a pretty tumultuous, kind of funny how you kind of almost like repeat your parents' relationships sometimes, you
yeah.
know, and
Hmm.
have to learn and try to do better. But kind of got out of that, and I taught music. I started learning to play. My grandmother started teaching me, golly, just probably right around the time I could talk. Started teaching me to play the piano. And
Okay.
so when I was a teenager, that was my first job, was teaching music because she had a music studio. And so that was my first job. I taught music for, oh gosh, 25 years probably.
Mm, that's deep.
And yeah, pretty. So I taught piano, guitar, and voice, along with music theory and music history, private lessons. And I tutored, worked with a lot of kids. My grandmother had a degree in child psychology and in music. So we worked a lot with kids that had learning disabilities and different things along those lines. So a lot of the kids that I worked with had, you know, I mean, I hate to say like the terms, but like we had a lot of like normal kids, but then we had a lot of kids that did, they struggled. They had multitude of challenges,
Right.
that they dealt with. And so that was, I think, really where I started learning how to teach kids. And then that developed into just how to work with people in
Mm,
general,
right. Right.
because I started learning during all of that that all the kids are different, which I mean, we know that now, as adults, and everybody learns differently. But one of the things that I always did was I didn't teach every kid the same way. I would find out when a kid came in for their first lessons I would spend those first few weeks trying to figure out, like, what do you like to do? What other hobbies do you have? What activities do you like? What subjects do you like in school? What subjects do you hate in school? What, because I'd try to figure out, like, what did they think they were good at?
Right.
What did they think were their challenges? What did, maybe they understood they liked baseball. They love
Right.
baseball. Well, then when we got to certain things in music, I knew that, like, okay, well, they already understand baseball. So if they're struggling over here, how can I relate this to baseball so that they can understand it?
I was just about to say that, and that's one thing that I used to appreciate growing up when the teacher would do that. Even
Mhm.
my very first therapist used to equate things that I liked or enjoyed or that I was familiar with to whatever I needed to
Mhm.
learn. So
Yeah.
and a lot of teachers don't do that. So that's a
Mhm.
very good tool or method.
Yeah.
You gotta pull from what they like and just put them together. I do that with my kids. They
Mhm.
be stubborn and they be I just don't get it. So then when you make it seem like a game, because sometimes homework and stuff, if as long as you make it seem like a game or you do
Mhm.
it with them, you
Yep.
might know the answer, but you act like you don't. Like, oh, you got that last one right. Oh, you smarter than
Yep.
me.
Yep.
Kids thrive off of
Yes.
stuff like that because
Yep.
now you intertwining life lessons and homework with something that's tangible and personable, something that's it's bonding. That's what it is. It's
Mhm.
bonding. And
Absolutely.
every kid wants that. Like I said before, everybody want to feel desired, loved, wanted, appreciated. So, like I said, that's a good method.
Yeah. So I would do that. And I had one, the mom brought in, I might have told you about this one over Messenger when we were talking before, but I had a mom bring in her two daughters. One of them was very good at music, was very good, but the other one was blind, and she had a brain tumor that made her cognitively where she wasn't going to be anywhere past somewhere between 5 and 7 years old. She wasn't going to develop past that. And she had a lot of physical um, uh, issues as well. Her fine motor skills were very, very limited. So she would struggle a lot. But her mom was like, she wants to play the piano, but none of the other teachers will take her, because of how she is. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, can you just try with her? Like, she doesn't need, to play this like beautiful Tchaikovsky piece or something,
Right.
just for her to be able to just learn. And I'm like, yep. I'm like, don't see why not. I'm always one. It's like, all right, I hadn't done this before, but can't hurt anything. I'll give it a shot.
Right.
And then I sat there and I got thinking to myself after I agreed to do this. And then I'm kind of like, wait a minute. Obviously, people who are blind can play. I mean, Stevie Wonder and many of these others, and we're kind of like, so I know it's possible, but I'm sitting here and I'm like, I have never played the piano without seeing it before. I'm like, I don't know what it's like to be blind. I don't know how I'm going to describe this to her
Yeah.
or
Right.
explain
Right.
this
Right.
to her without describing it for sight, because I've always taught children who could see. So I
Right.
got home, and we had a studio at my grandmother's home. And so I got home to my house that night, and I got thinking to myself, I'm like, well, all right, I'm going to sit down at my piano, and I'm like, I'm just going to go like this. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to play like this. And then all of a sudden I started realizing, I'm like, well, that's not working because my peripheral vision can see my hands. Like, so I'm still seeing. And I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? So I started looking around and I'm like, okay. And I saw this scarf. So I'm like, okay, I'll fold the scarf up. I'm going to blindfold myself. And I blindfolded it to where like it was pitch black. I couldn't see anything.
Right.
So after I bruised my legs, I don't know how badly, trying to get back into the piano stool. And I sat there and I realized like I had to sit down at the stool for a minute and just go like, okay, wait a second. I need to recover just from entering into this. you know, um, I sat down and I just started trying to feel the keys and just be like, okay, what do I feel? What is this? And, starting to try to figure it all out without being able to look and see what that was, and like figure
Right.
out new ways to describe and explain. and everything. So I did that until I was able to sit down and play some simple songs that I knew by memory, but till I could actually play them on the piano and figure out why I could play it, you know? And
Right.
once I did, then that's kind of where I went and started teaching her on the piano, and then realized that the little stinker was cheating the system a little bit.
I mean,
The music. So our after I'd been teaching her for a little while, I would know she was feeling the keys to make sure see where she was at. But the piano at the studio was so old. It was such an old piano that there were certain keys which I didn't notice, again because being sighted, I'm not thinking all of it, and I'm blindfolded. I didn't pay attention to everything apparently. And on that piano in the studio, it's so old that certain parts of the ivory that were on the keys on the very edges were chipped.
mm,
And they were chipped on certain ways. I mean, very minor. Like this one over here had this size of a chip, and this one over here next to it had two little chips in it, and then another one over here had a different size chip in it. And she was feeling those chips and memorized the chips. And so when she was playing it, she wasn't paying attention to the black keys on the top that are grouped into twos and threes so that she could feel where they were, which is what I wanted her to do, because then she could translate that to any piano, right? No,
right.
no, no.
Right.
She was finding the chips on the white keys on these edges.
Well, you got to learn somehow. You know, they always say like when you lose one sense, like it enhances your other senses. So I mean,
Yep.
I ain't mad at her. I mean, it's good.
I
She
sat
took
there.
the initiative.
It took me so long to figure out what she had done with doing
Right.
this, and then I'm like, oh my goodness.
That's
And so but it was something she learned how to play her. Oh, my light just fell. Attacked me over here. But yeah, no, she sat there, she learned how to play scales all the way to where she was able to play chords, full 3-note chords, and we were playing songs like Jesus Loves Me and Amazing Grace, and things like that over time. And it was just different, and she just needed a different way to learn, and she needed somebody to see her and understand
mhm.
her and how she learned. And I kind of took a lot of that kind of stuff over with me when I eventually got recruited to a human trafficking safe house. And I was asked to come over there because they needed, they were struggling to develop their education program. And when the girls are pulled, this is a teen human trafficking program that our safe house that had girls that were from the ages of about 14 to 18 years old that were in there. And they would have to be pulled and they would be put into these safe houses, but they were kind of like tucked away. So they couldn't go to school. They couldn't be on the internet. They couldn't have phones. They couldn't do anything because you're having to hide them, right? And the kids, it's not like what people think it is. I think a lot of people think kids being rescued from trafficking, that they're coming into a Sound of Freedom type situation where they're just like, oh, thank God you're here to take me, and get me home. That's not what is most common, that situation. What's most common is that these kids are put in and the stuff is happening right under your nose. It could be happening with the kid living in the house next door to you and you just don't realize it. But they are brainwashed into thinking that that's the normal way that things run because it typically starts so young. And when they're pulled out of that, they think that we're the bad guy.
Right.
And so not only have they had, terrible, relationship with school in general, because that's the least of their problems really, in life is going to school. They're kind of like, I don't really care about that because that's not really my biggest issue, and but so not only do they just not care about going to school in the first place or education in the first place, they think that you're the bad guy. So they're fighting against you the whole time anyhow, just in general. So they were really struggling to develop this program because they couldn't have the kids online. They couldn't put them in school. They couldn't, so how do you educate them? Plus,
Right.
when abuse starts, that's typically where education starts to fall apart. So even if they're still in school, they don't, the smooth learning of education stops. So they're going to school every day, but they're really not learning a lot in there because there's so much else going on, and the trauma in the brain is just making it where they're not progressing, understandably
Right.
so, and their education becomes, all I can describe it as is a bunch of Swiss cheese, because they
Right.
will understand, they'll know certain things over here, which makes you assume that they understand this over here, because how can they know this if they don't know this? And then you find out they really don't understand this. And I had girls that were coming in that were 15, 16 years old, and they couldn't do subtraction with borrowing.
Mm-hmm.
They could barely add with carrying. Multiplication was hit or miss, division non-existent. Reading books from, say, like the Biscuit series could be done, but it was a struggle, you know. So there was a lot of things like that we were dealing with, and it was like, okay, well, how do you get them to progress to where they're actually kind of catching up when they're fighting against you? You're dealing with the state, which that's a whole other conversation in and of itself. So I got pulled in for that. And what I learned working with them and pulling in the same concept was you got to meet them where they're at.
Absolutely.
You can't.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh no, I was just about to say I understand exactly what you mean, because like I know in schools and a lot of parents like to be quick to diagnose children, right? And
Uh-huh.
sometimes it's the trauma that's preventing them from learning, because your mind is so powerful, right? And once it's distracted, it's hard to retain any other information. Like I know when I
Yeah.
was going to school, I was labeled a problem child, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the schools wanted to put me on Ritalin and things like that. They
Uh-huh.
wanted to say, oh, he has learning disabilities. Well, my mom, she never agreed with that notion, or maybe she did, but she was definitely against medication. So
Yeah.
that's something my family was against on my mom's side, anyways,
Uh-huh.
against medication. We're not doing it. And earlier when I was saying about how I feel like I should get credit for certain things in my life, that's just one of them. When everybody counted me out and said I had learning disabilities, well, I turned out to be more intelligent than a lot of people I was going to school with. They couldn't even stand
Uh-huh.
next to me. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
to this day, I still don't get the credit for those things, and it's mind boggling to me. I sit there, it's a head scratcher. I'm like, this is crazy. Like,
Yeah.
how you say I'm going to be here, but I'm here, and I'm still not getting my just due. But
Mm-hmm.
that's another thing, and I learned that from therapy, right? Because a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people shun therapy, but my some of my therapists that I had in life taught me a lot of things. Like I did the CBT, which is the cognitive
Yeah.
behavior therapy,
Yeah.
and it just teaches you a lot of things. And I think a lot of the therapy helped me emotionally. So when we talk
Mm-hmm.
about emotional intelligence, I think going to therapy helped me, and then
Yeah.
that coupled with life experiences, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just growing up and maturing and knowing what I wasn't going to stand for anymore, right? Because standing
Mm-hmm.
up for yourself is very
Yep.
important. And I always say I believe in myself. And yeah, I just had to have that grit, that determination, that tenacity. I just had to be there for myself. I had to show up for myself, because if you don't show up for yourself, ain't nobody else gonna do it for you.
Nope. That's right.
So
Yep.
that's the thing. So like sometimes like the traumas in my life prevented me from progressing sooner, put it that way,
Mhm.
sooner. But it takes a lot of growth, it takes a lot of maturity, it takes a lot of discipline and determination to pick yourself up and put yourself on the pedestal to be able to prosper and thrive and things of that nature. That's all I wanted to
Mhm.
add.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's 100% that. I mean, and the idea of like, well, you're not smart or you're not intelligent or whatever, that I feel is looked at so wrong. And I saw it so much. Now, I already had this thought prior to doing the safe house, but it just kind of like solidified this when I was in the safe house, is that people have a stereotypical idea of what intelligence is. And that means that you can go into school, you're going to get straight A's, you're going to be able to get that scholarship, you're going to be able to, and it's very, very much geared into book smarts. And really and this is what I feel a lot about mainstream education. And I heard this, I cannot for the life of me remember where I heard it, so I want to verify I did not come up with this phrase, but it's judging the talent and intellect of a goldfish by its ability to climb a tree.
Right.
That monkey can't do what that goldfish does.
Right.
It's excellent at being able to scale that tree and jump from limb to limb, but it can't do what the goldfish does in the water. Right? But that goldfish can swim circles around that monkey, so but they're in different environments. They're different creatures. They're different. That doesn't mean that one is better than the other,
Right.
And I feel that that's kind of the same thing. And these kids, what I started learning in there also was that because of these situations they were in, and honestly, I think to some degree, this is a lot of adults with children in general. And I think then it was exasperated in these particular situations. These kids had never been asked their opinions about anything. And had almost been, and I guess that's part of the brainwashing, had been taught to never question anything.
Right.
So
what it does is it's like conditions them to feel like they don't have purpose. Yeah. Right. They don't have any purpose. They don't have any say. They don't have a position in life. That's what it does.
Makes them easy to control as well. And because there would be things as grandiose, because I had there was a lot of times, because I taught them so many things, about a lot of different stuff. And I remember we were going through stuff on World War II, and we were talking about the Holocaust. We were talking about Hitler. We were talking about, a lot of those things. And these kids had, I think one that I had in there knew what the Holocaust was and what World War II was. The rest of them had never even heard of it. So we go through and then asking them their opinion on it. And they didn't have one. They couldn't tell you if it was good or it was bad. They could not put into words an opinion. And and I use that example because it's just objectively was evil, it's that's not you go and you kill 6 million people just because of the religious affiliation.
Their background, religion, yes.
That's just wrong no matter how you look at it, right? It doesn't matter. So that's just, it was an objective truth, and they could not form an opinion on it. So I worked really, really hard during the times that I had them to start developing critical thinking. And part of that was that no matter what opinion they gave me, these kids would tell me, they're like, Miss Brooke, they're like, I don't understand what you believe. They're like, I don't know what you think. And I'm like, good. I'm like, I don't want you to know what I think, because if you know what I think, then that's going to influence how you think. And I don't want to influence that. I want you to learn how to think for yourself and how to develop your own opinion on things. So I would sit there and I would ask them questions as we started going on different things and started learning about stuff and going back to things with the Holocaust. I would sit there and ask them and be like, okay, so was what happened as they started critically thinking more, was this good or was this bad? Was this something, were they right to turn people over? Were they wrong to turn people over? And it was interesting. You had some of the kids say that it was wrong. And you had some of them say that, well, yeah, they should, because it was the law. That was what they should be doing. They should be following the country's law, but you're dealing with lots of different, there's a lot of trauma going on back here. So you have to take a lot of that into consideration. So I would turn around with the ones that said, no, that you absolutely would not follow the law on that. That was just, it's wrong.
Right.
Well, I would argue the other side of it to them. And I'd say, well, okay, but you didn't follow the law. Now you might have tried to save these people, but now you just got your own family killed. Now, you know, how was that justified? You know,
did that sway their opinions, or they stayed the course?
Boy, I'll tell you what, on some of those, boy, they'd sit there and they would hold firm to it, which is what I wanted. You know, right. I wanted them to learn to stand up for what they believed in. And I also wanted my thing that I always have said, and I've done it for my kids, and I've done it with the kids that I taught, and with the kids at the safe house. If you have enough cojones to sit there and state your opinion on something, then you need to be able to defend it with fact and not just because I think so.
But you know what? But that's where it starts though, because even if those are the terms, as long as you have the wherewithal to know where to seek that knowledge, or to further your stance. So we ain't gonna know everything. We're not perfect. So it's okay to not know something, because then in turn you can sit there and say, you know what, and trying to prove your point. Now you're going back and doing research and you study, and it just. It's that your brain is the biggest muscle in your body that needs working out every day on a consistent basis. So it just let go back to the drawing board, and you be like, oh, okay, now you have an aha moment, like aha.
Yep. That's essentially what I would do with them. Yep. And that's essentially what I would do with them. Be like, okay, why do you feel that way? Well, they just gave me because I think so. And it's like, okay, well, but there has to be something other than that. There has to be something driving that feeling for you. What is it? You know, I don't care if it's the sheer fact of just the fact of like, well, because killing anybody's wrong. That was a good enough answer to at least give me something, aside of just because, so, it was things like that. If they told me that they thought that you should follow the law, then I argued the other side of that, to them. So they never knew what I thought, about anything.
Right.
But
it's good. You keep them on their toes. That's always good, and the more they keep going back and forth with you, that's good. It's a lot of people that don't feel intelligent, as we were saying before. One thing my father said to me that always stuck to me was this. It's been times where people are like, you're dumb, you're stupid, because when I was growing up, those two words, you say any of those two words, I was fighting you, because it's something that I struggle with, because I told you, like, people were saying I had learning disabilities and things of that nature. So you say dumb or stupid, retard, anything like that, I was fighting you. I didn't care how big you was, how old you was. My father used to tell me this all the time, and it stuck with me. He says, you're not dumb, you're not stupid. He said, do you have the ability to learn? I'm like, yes. He said, okay. So by definition, a dummy, right, to be stupid means you have the inability to learn. So long as you have the ability, you can never be dumb or stupid. So the more he said that to me, the more I felt encouraged, the more it made me feel like, you know what? He's right. I do have the ability. I can do this. And repetition, the more you tell yourself something, or the more you hear something, it becomes who you are. And that was my thought process. So I took that into my adult life. When people say I couldn't, I'm like, oh no, I know I can. Ain't nobody gonna tell me I can.
Yeah, no. Absolutely. And I had one girl that came in, and she was absolutely determined that she was not going to do anything. She had no need to do school, because as soon as she got out of that safe house, she was just going to go back to the neighborhood. She was going to deal drugs. And that was her whole plan. Like, that was the extent of the plan. And I'm like, honey, you like doing hair. I'm like, why not? I can get you in, like, literally can sit there and get you in with somebody to let you shadow in a salon, like a high-end salon, for you to see if that's something you would like to do. Nope. I'm just going to go. It's going to be easier. Just sit there and go and deal drugs and do this. And part of it was the fact that, that they think that they have preconceived ideas of who we are as people working in that safe house, not realizing that a lot of us have gone through some pretty deep stuff that we just don't share or haven't shared, because honestly, it's not something that we need to dump onto these kids, right? But they also sit there and think that they can shock us, and then they get a reaction from us, right? And I told her, I said, okay. I said, so that's the plan. I said, you're going to have a drug empire, essentially. And she goes, yep. She's like, I'm just going to shoot that on the corner. I'm like, okay. Well, I was needing her to do math, and I was having some particular type of math that I needed her to do. Boy, she had no desire to do it. She was like, nope, I don't need to. I said, okay. I said, well, I said, I don't know if you know this or not. I said, but I have a little experience in my family of this whole drug business situation. I said, and math is kind of a big deal in that.
Big deal.
And I said, so I said, I would suggest that if that's going to be your business, that you get good at math. I'm like, because there's going to be some underhanded stuff going on there. I said, so this is what I want you to do. I said, if you really, really think that that's what you're wanting to do, I said, that's fine. I said, that's perfectly fine with me. I said, I support it. I said, so here's what we're going to do. I said, this is what a business plan looks like. Okay. I said, I want you to take this and build your drug business plan. And she looked at me like I had about 5 heads. And
I would have too. Like, what?
Oh, what am I going to do? Keep fighting her on it all day and then get nowhere? That doesn't make any sense. Then I'm not moving.
I see where you're going with this though. And I was thinking, my wheels was turning when you were speaking, so I know where it's going. Like, yeah.
I'm like, all right. I'm like, let's do this. So she goes, okay. I said, but we're going to play a little game. I said, I'm going to help you build your drug empire over here. And we're going to do this business plan. I said, but then I said, you're going to come over here. I said, you're going to help me build a salon business plan to do braids. I said, because you love doing, I said, you like doing braids and you're actually really good at it. She goes, I said, and then I said, we're going to have 2 hats sitting over here. I said, and I'm going to take and I'm going to throw good and bad things that can occur from each business side. Maybe your salon, you know, your tools go out and you need new tools, so you got to go spend money on that. You've got someone's hair bleached off and you're going to have to like comp that, you know, whatever, an issue happened, whatever. I said, and then over here, I said, you're going to have some similar things that could be bad that happen in your drug business. I said, and we're just going to sit there and kind of see how you're going to have to pull them out randomly to see what happens, right? Okay. And I even let her be the one to come up with the goods and bads that can happen in both things. So I did not sit there and like spin this one heavier than the other. So this was not me. So she goes, okay, fine. She still thought she was going to get me with this, you know? So we sat there, she did it, got my math done. Just want to sit there and put that out there. The math lesson was accomplished that week. Good. At the same time though, she sat there and was able to pull out the things like, oh, well, guess what? You sat there and have a hospital bill from the drug business due to a violent act that occurred, you know, and that cost you this much money and this much time from being able to go deal. You know, then there was another, oh, you've been arrested. You know, now you've got this and this much time that now you can't deal because you're in jail. And then you've got like some over here with the salon stuff that happened with other situations that occurred as well. But you get to keep working, right? And continue to do these things. By the time it was said and done, she sat there and she looked at it by the end of the week and she's like, okay. She's like, well, then I'll do braids. She's like, but I'm not going to cosmetology school for it. She's like, but I'll do it.
That's a start.
Yeah, like that's a start. I'll take it. It's like
Absolutely. I love that, man. You know, because and networking would have been another good one too. Like, you know, everybody that's selling drugs and stuff, they all got locked up, and now you lose that network, you lose that support. Well, you don't never get support in the streets. Yeah. But if you have a salon, now you get the network, now you get the support of other people in the community because this parent or this girl or this mother, they want their
Yep.
hair done. So now you're getting that support because they're gonna spread word of mouth. You ain't getting that in
Mm-hmm.
the drug business.
Oh,
Drug business, you got to always have eyes in the back of your head. So
you sure
that
do.
would have been another way to spin it too. But yeah, I love that. I said so right away. I was like, I know where you're going with this story. That
Yep.
was pretty
I was
good.
having to think on my toes on that one because it's like these kids, they keep you on your toes as much as you had to try to keep them on theirs. They were keeping you on yours too, because if you let them see you slip up or like
Right.
pause for a moment, oh, they'd eat you alive. And but it was nice because through all of that, I learned so much. Not just, I mean, I learned so much about myself. I learned a lot
Mm,
about them,
right.
and we had ones where, you'd set them up for easy wins just so that they learned that they were capable,
Yep.
just like, hey, we're going to do things. I told them as soon as I walked in, first day, I said a 70 is failing in my class, anything less than a 70. I said, don't think that you can just be able to barely do and get by. And they're the gasps and the what? And I'm like, yep. I'm like, sorry,
Yeah.
and but the thing was, like, these kids, like, I had one of them, I'm like, all you got to do, I said, here, we're going to do this science. And I said, all I need you to do, I said, I'm going to write the stuff on the board. I said, if you copy what I put on the board, you will pass your quiz. I
Right.
said, you'll do it. You'll pass it. All you got to do is copy what I'm doing. Because all I was looking for was effort, right?
Right.
Put effort in. And so I said, just do it. I said, trust me, just do it. And they did. And I said, okay, with the end of the week, I said, we're going to have an open note test. Or quiz. So as long as you took notes, you're
You're
good.
gonna pass.
You're going to
Yeah.
pass. As long as you put the
Yeah.
effort in throughout the week, you're going to pass. So all I was doing was trying to reward effort at that point.
Right.
And
And
because,
I was just
yeah,
about to say that's a good lesson because I like to tell whoever are listening, whether it's older than me, younger than me, I like to tell people all the time that there's a lesson in every lesson in life. You know,
mm-hmm,
it's everything in life. It's funny how it intertwines in to some degree.
mm-hmm,
It could be something as simple as, like you were saying, math.
mm-hmm,
That's you can equate that to just about anything in life. Having empathy can be equated to your parenting skills. You
yeah,
know,
yep,
um, holding the door open for this old lady, or while she struggled to get in the walkway. When you have a kid,
mm-hmm,
it teaches you that nourishment, right? So
yep,
everything is hand in hand in life. So everything comes full circle. So it's important to that early childhood development and stuff. It's very,
mm-hmm,
very important. That's why,
yeah,
like, child protective services or any therapist, they harp on those things, or
yeah,
even your grandmother, because your grandmother, she got that wisdom, so now she
yep,
knows the lessons to try to instill on her daughter. So it's everything in life is intertwined. So it's important to pay attention to a lot of things in life.
it is. And that quiz, that first quiz that I was just saying there, that came out that first week, one of the girls, she made, like, I think it was an 80 on it. I can't remember how many questions I had on the quiz right now, but I do remember she made a B.
Yeah.
And it was like an 85 or something. She made a B on it. And she had her head down, so depressed, when I was going back out to hand their papers back out so they could see what they got. And she just knew that, like, she had never succeeded at anything before in her mind. She was
Right.
just already prepared to fail, right?
Mm.
And I handed it to her and she flipped it over. And I have to sit there and tell this story with a little bit of trying to keep myself together with it, because it always sits there and kind of like chokes me up when I say it, because it's just something so simple, that so small, to us. But she flipped that paper over and saw the B, and she started to cry. See, I told you every time. Upside down.
It is okay.
It's and she just couldn't believe it. And she ran up to my desk and she says, "Is this real?" And I said, "Yeah,
Mm,
it's real. I told
that's
you all you
powerful.
had to do was put in the effort and you would pass."
Wow.
And it was an open note. It was an open note quiz. It wasn't like she had to memorize it. It wasn't like she had to do
Right.
whatever. But the thing was, is that I knew these kids had not had success,
Right.
and they needed it. to have those small wins. So not that I was believing in them, but they could believe in themselves, and they could
Right.
see that they were capable of it. And she, boy, that kid, she sat there that day and she didn't let go of that paper. She came and gave me the biggest hug. And this was the child that the first couple of days she refused to talk to me. She wouldn't even look at me, more or less
Right.
talk to me. And then that girl came and gave me a big old hug. She's 15. And that paper, she ran that to the administration office that was
She was proud. She was
corner
proud.
to show everybody. She took it into the house to show those house parents and the volunteers and put it on the fridge. And that kid, she was so proud. And she told me, she says, I've never passed anything ever.
You helped her find her purpose, or you remind her that she has purpose. You always have to. That's why it's good when you have kids to be there and be present and then make them feel loved and valued and all those things I told you I was lacking growing up. It's very important because it goes a long way. Just like the story you just said, she didn't believe, and it's most likely because she was brainwashed or conditioned to believe that she wasn't nothing, that she had
Mm-hmm.
no value.
Yep.
So I love every bit of that. And it goes to what you was telling me before, where you said that you help the youth, feel seen and understood, right? Like, now, did that came from some of your traumas in your life, or where did that come from?
I think that, I think probably, I'd have to say probably my grandmother, because I mean, there was a lot, like I said, my parents were in not a good relationship. I mean, you know, that was that was really bad with them. I, would see my dad every other weekend, but that was still, he had a lot going on, a lot of his own issues. My mom, was a really good mom, but she struggled being just me and her. And so there was a lot in that aspect that would go to the trauma in my childhood there. But my grandma was she was really about kids. She really loved kids, and she had kind of I lived right next door to her, so that was one thing that was nice. And she always just kind of, I don't know, I guess, like, I don't know how to explain what she did. She just kind of always explained things in a different way than what anybody else in my life did. And she was one that made you feel seen, in those moments where, like, God love my mom, and she could only, and it's one of those things, like you were saying, like with our parents and stuff like that. A lot of times they only know what they were raised with too, you know? And I was in high school. I was in the who's who among American high school students, which I think they say like 5% of high school students get into it once, and I made it in 3 times. And so that's like less than 1% of the original 5% that do that. So I knew how great of an accomplishment that was. And I ran and I showed my mom, and my mom sat there and she told me, she goes, "That's nice." I'm like, but she didn't understand what it was.
Right.
She was always supportive and loving, but she didn't know what it was.
Right.
And where my grandma, she didn't really necessarily, I think she knew more of what it was than my mom did, but because I was excited about it, my grandma was excited about it. She was like,
Right.
"Yeah,
Right.
that's." And she, it didn't matter what it was, how small of a thing it was, how whatever. She just made you feel like you were the best at whatever it was, that you could do it, that it didn't matter. And so I don't know, I think like a lot of it was that, and I know how she made me feel, and I guess I just kind of took that same kind of
Sentiment.
feeling to, yeah,
Right. Right.
sentiment into working with other kids. And my mom has credited my grandma. My grandma that I'm talking about is actually my dad's mom, but my mom
Right.
has even credited her a lot too. And she's like, man, she's like, your grandma just knew how to do that kind of stuff. And she's like, I just didn't, you know?
Right.
And she's told me, my mom's told me before, she goes, I'm so proud of you, because she's like, you've taken all of that. And she's like, and you've taken that into your kids and, you know, to these other kids. And she's like, you've, you know, and it kind of, it's like, it makes me happy, but it kind of breaks my heart all at the same time when my mom has told me, she's like, you're so much better of a mom than I was. And I'm like, Mom, I'm like, you were a great mom. You know, it's like you did the best that you could, you know?
Right.
So it's, but yeah, I think it was just kind of like that, you know, you know how somebody makes you feel when you feel seen and
Yes.
when you feel believed in, and, you know, you just want to provide that for others.
I
So,
love the fact that you highlighted both your grandmother and your mother, because it's still Women's History Month, and like I said on the previous episode, the contributions of a woman tends to fall to the wayside a lot of times, especially with men. We don't always give you guys the credit you guys deserve. So I appreciate you for being on the podcast and being a good mother and being a good woman that I know that you are. And to your grandmother, your mother as well, because without them it wouldn't be no you. So shout out to them. But yeah, I mean, all those things is very important. Now, for the viewers, let's talk about some of the ways that we can help the youth feel seen and understood.
yeah. Oh, I think the first thing that I would say on a lot of it is that, you know, don't just first realize that, you know, kids have opinions and they have thoughts themselves,
Mhm.
and they're not going to be as developed as what ours are because we have so much more life experience to go with it. But I think that as adults, we get so wrapped up in being adults that we forget what it was like to be a kid.
Mhm.
And we
Yes.
forget what it was like to be developing our opinions and trying to figure life out, you
Right.
know?
Right.
And when a kid comes up and they have an opinion, maybe it's kind of sounds out there. And you know, it's out there. But you know what? Don't just be dismissive of it. You
Right.
know, question it. Well, okay, that's quite interesting. What makes you think that? How did you
Right.
come to that? You know, and
Right.
be willing to actually talk to them and discuss things with them, you
Right.
know, and gently guide them to, you know, maybe they needed a little adjustment on something, you know, maybe it's like, okay, I can kind of see where you're coming from on that, but this is really, you know, I see where you would see if this is how it was. Yeah, I could see that too, but really this one particular thing here is actually more like this,
Right.
which
Right.
is why it would shift this way, and kind of take the time to try to explain,
Mhm.
and without making them feel that what they thought was stupid or that they
Right.
were dumb
Mhm.
or um you know, or anything like belittling them with it. So I think a lot of it comes with just talking and having
Yeah.
conversations, and you know, not being dismissive of their thoughts. Doesn't
Right.
mean that you
Being
have to accept them,
right.
but don't be dismissive, you
Right.
know?
Just
Yeah.
being patient. Like helping them feel seen and understood, right? It
Mhm.
requires a lot of intentional, active listening without immediate judgment or advice, as you was just saying.
Mhm.
It's also about creating a safe space for open communication,
Yeah.
right? I think you was
Yeah.
just touching on that a little bit, about validating their emotions, showing interest in their passions, and
Mhm.
also respecting their privacy, right? All these
Right.
things you was just touching on a little bit, so all those things is important in including them in things, because one thing so I was a kitchen manager for 8 years,
Mhm.
and what the very thing we're touching on right now is what I applied to my managerial experience, like my staff, right? I
Mhm.
used to tell them, like, you don't have to call me your boss. I'd rather be a leader than a boss, because a boss just tell you what to do and a leader shows you the way, right?
Exactly.
And one thing I used to do as a manager is, hand out cleaning projects. But as I'm handing out cleaning projects, I'm out there cleaning with them, and they were like, "What are you doing? This is our job." it's okay. I got some time, and I used to do it because it makes you. It's building that community, that rapport, making them feel like we're a team, and I'm not just standing above you telling you do. I'm gonna do it with you, and
Mm-hmm.
it really goes a long way like that, and that's one
Yeah.
thing that I've learned in life. And when I was a manager, these are things that I was doing. I included them
Mm-hmm.
in anything, like even in certain things, like if I wanted to change the layout of the kitchen, even
Mm-hmm.
if I had my mind set up and I was like, I'm going to do it this way, as you was just saying, instead of going about it that way, I'm like, I'm changing the setup and this is how it's going to be. No, I included them. I said, this is what my thoughts are. What do you think? Even if I got my mom made up, because I know that they're going to appreciate that they're involved. Right,
Yeah.
it makes them feel important and valued. I'm like, so if I put this here, what do you think? Would that make it easier? And I
Mm-hmm.
promise you, like if everybody applies that to their day-to-day, life
Mm-hmm.
would be so much sweeter. And I used to do those things. And then sometimes, even if I didn't want to do it, I'm gonna do it your way. But if it don't work, then we're gonna do it my way. And then,
Mm-hmm.
oh, okay. And a lot of people be gung ho and they're like, oh yeah, my way's gonna work. And then when the restaurant gets busy, now they gotta walk way over here for this product. It doesn't
Yep.
work. I'm like, and I'll be over the expo, and restaurants is like expo on the other side of the line. I'm like, you okay? You need help? You figure it out, or what's the hang up? Oh, it's just
Mm-hmm.
not working out. This setup ain't right. I'm like, see, we talked about this, but I'm gonna come back there. I'm gonna help you wrestle with it. And when we have a moment, then we'll rearrange it. So it's
Yeah.
about inclusion, helping them, making them feel important, valued, and part of the team.
Yeah. That
So
gives them a
I
sense of
like that you said that.
ownership. Yeah, that gives them a sense of ownership of what you're
Yes, it's
doing too.
ownership as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
It gives them it gives them an extra reason to want to come to work too. They
Yes.
come to work like,
Yeah.
I'm important, I'm
Yeah.
valued.
Yes.
Again,
Exactly.
my upbringing, I didn't have that, so
Yep.
I think a lot of that helps me in life. I
Mm-hmm.
know what I was expecting and what I like. And before I was a manager, I was a line cook. I was just an hourly cook. And so I know certain
Mm-hmm.
managers that I liked, or things that they did that I liked. I said, okay,
Mm-hmm.
now it's my turn to be a manager. Let me apply the things that I like from the other
Mm-hmm.
side.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people looked at me and was like, yo, you different. I'm like, I try to be, you know?
Different is fun. Normal's boring. And
Right,
like, yeah, I mean, because like I would do, my daughter, she likes to like come up with like inventions in her brain. She's very kind of like engineering, my youngest one. And
right,
she was sitting there one time and she's like, oh, I want to have an invention so I don't have to go inside the chicken coop to give them their food. And I'm like,
right.
okay, what's your invention? So she sat there and she was like, well, I want to make this tube and I want to have this and it can go down and then it slides into their bowl and we can put their bowl underneath it. And I'm like, cool. I mean, she was like 7 at the time. So that was like
Right.
a wow invention for her at that point, right? I'm like, cool. What do we need to do that with? So we took her to the store, let her get some stuff to do it with, made it. She thought that was just like pristine. So she kept this like invention kind of thing going along in her head. And like she came up with that. She's like, I'd like to do that with the horse's food too. How can I do that? She's like, if I had the horse feed up here on the porch, she goes, because our house sits up a little higher, like about 4 feet off the ground. And she goes, I could do that. She's like, I could stretch like a cable from here to there over where the horse eats. And I could put stuff in like a bucket and make it go down that way. And then it'd tip when it got over there. And I'm like, first off, I'm thinking, I am not building this. We are not doing this because that's going to be ghastly, out there. First off, I'm sitting there, I'm like, interesting. I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, that might work. I'm like, I see a small problem though. Like I didn't tell her like that's just a terrible idea. I said, but I'm thinking though, I'm like, the way that cord would have to go, it's going to pass over this way. I said, and that's going to mean that the truck usually drives through there to go drop the hay block off. I said, and at the angle it's going, I said, I'm pretty sure the truck's going to run into it. I said that. So what do you think about that? And she sat and she thought about it. She goes, yeah, all right, that might not work. That might be a problem. So it wasn't telling her that her idea was bad or I didn't like it, even though I didn't like it. Like, but it was just critical thinking with it.
I was just about to say that. In turn, also it keeps her mind going. It keeps it fresh.
Mm-hmm.
It keeps it processing, right? Just like a computer. A lot of people talk about AI and stuff. Well, a computer can't function, AI can't function without a processor, and a
Mm-hmm.
processor just means continuous work. And
Right.
that's another thing people are afraid to do is putting in that work. So,
Yep.
hey, that's very important. Keep the mind moving and motivated and going, because without that engine block, you don't have anything.
That's
You
right.
just like
That's right.
breakfast is important in the morning. So a lot of people say that, oh, I don't eat breakfast in the morning. Well, I tell people like this. I guarantee you one thing. It could be a fruit. Eat that fruit and tell me how your day-to-day go.
Yep.
It's actually better. And I didn't know this when I was growing up. Like, I heard of it, but my father used to be like, okay, spend a day no breakfast. I'm like, cool, we did it. And then
Mm-hmm.
school, how did you feel? A little bogged down. I wasn't thinking like as sharply as I normally would. Okay, so we're gonna eat breakfast tomorrow and see if anything changes. So we did that exercise a few times, throughout the
Mm-hmm.
course of the week, and I've come to learn that yes, eating in the morning, it does it ignites you. It gives you that extra
Yeah.
fuel, and
Little
it,
bump.
it,
Like,
it allows your brain to wake up
yeah.
faster. So it's
Mm-hmm.
very important. So a lot of people don't know that. I'm like, just eat
Yeah.
something. Eat a graham
Yeah.
cracker or something.
But you know what your dad lets you deal with, though, and I think this is a thing that we have stopped letting kids do a lot too, is deal with natural consequences.
Mm-hmm.
Said,
Yeah.
okay, don't eat.
Yeah.
Have your days at school. Let's see how that works, and you tell me how well that worked for you.
Especially for like exams and stuff. It really makes a difference. It does.
Mm-hmm.
Just everything, just the whole human functionality
Mm-hmm.
changes. So
Yep.
it's important. So I don't always eat first thing in the morning, but I
Mm-hmm.
try to. It could be
Yeah.
something small. It doesn't matter, but I just knows the neurons in my brain just functions at a higher
Mm-hmm.
level with food in my system. I
Yep.
just wanted to touch back on that concept you were saying earlier when you the judging the abilities of a goldfish by
How well it can
how
climb.
well it climbs a tree.
Mm-hmm.
So that concept is just it just highlights that judging individuals by irrelevant standards
Mm-hmm.
leads to unfair assessments of their intelligence or their work.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people do that. They we're too judgy a lot of times.
Yeah.
And it's a strength in every weakness. I like analogies. I like to speak poetically sometimes, but like it's a strength in every weakness. And instead of recognizing that, a lot of people just so quick to point the finger, right? It's so
Mm-hmm.
easy to delegate than to put in the work. It's so easy to point the blame or point the finger as opposed to having empathy and understanding. So I encourage people to dig a little bit deeper and just be the better version of themselves.
100%.
That's just me. Earlier you mentioned Christ. You believe in Christ. You're a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
What led you to Christ?
Oh boy, my family was kind of always that way. I think that's been a generational bit that kind of I was brought up like that. So I've always believed in Christ. I went to a private school that was a Baptist private school. So it was always there, but I went through a long time that um, I don't think I ever didn't believe in God, but I very much for a while questioned the I want to call the perfection or divinity of him. And so I went, and that was kind of more in my kind of earlier teen years, I think. And I don't know if that was the angsty teen trying to come out in me, and that was my rebellious streak that came through. But I had a very, very difficult time at that point with the idea that God was perfect and God was this all-knowing, had everyone's, the best interest in hand. Because if that was the case, I think right around that time, if I remember correctly, I think right around the time that I really started questioning a lot of that, I think the case of JonBenet Ramsey came up. And I remember telling my mom at one point, and I'm like, if that's the case, if he's supposed to be our father, then how could he let something like that happen? if he had all the powers in the universe and he loved us so much, like he was, like we were his children, I can tell you right now that if I had all the powers of the universe, I would never let something like that happen to my kid,
Right.
to my child. So in my brain, I just could never, like, I couldn't wrap my head around that kind of stuff. And I think that's during that time that you're, as a youth, as a child, that you're trying to kind of like make sense of the world. And I think at that point, it was the time where it was hard to get the idea that the world didn't just operate in black and white, that there's gray, you
Right,
know.
right. I like to say that, the world and life is not linear, but
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing. The younger we are, it's the more wise. The
Yeah.
older we get, it's more so like, okay, it's how do we succeed? How do we get to the next level? It's
Mhm.
I've lived and I learned. So I'm not asking so many whys. I'm more so of teaching. I'm in my coach teaching development stage
Mhm.
as opposed to living carefree and
Yeah.
lackadaisical and just be like, I'm gonna ask a whole bunch of questions, right? Because the older you get, the ideas that we get wiser, our mind gets sharper,
Mhm.
right? We lived and we learn, we're learning things every day. So that's how life's supposed to operate,
Yeah.
so we can
Yeah.
in turn teach our kids and
Yeah.
answer those whys because now we have the knowledge and the wherewithal. So
Yeah, and I think I feel bad for my mom during that time because I don't think she really knew how to what to say to me, during those questions and that point in time in my life. She just kind of hung in there with me and she goes, "Well, baby," she's like, "eventually," she's like, you'll understand. It's like there's
right,
just, God is God, and he understands things deeper and in more of a way than what we can. We look at things based in, a much lower level than what he does.
right,
And over time, I think she knew, like in her heart, obviously she understood a lot more. I just don't think she knew how to quite put it into words for
right.
me because I was going to be difficult like that.
But
But
but that's but nothing in life is easy. Another
yeah,
thing I like to tell people is this: life is hard, right? Because if life was easy, we all be doing something different, right?
yeah,
Well, nobody
absolutely.
really likes simplicity. Like kids, they play
Right.
video games. If they find it too easy, too
Mm-hmm.
simple, they're not. It's not going to hold their attention. They don't want
Right.
nothing to do with it.
They
Now, a
have a
lot of people
challenge.
say they hate difficult things, but really they don't because we are trained and conditioned to like that adversity. We like that give and take. We like that. Um, I win, I lose. We like that little cat and mouse game,
Mhm.
in life. It's something about it that just keeps us going because nobody really want to feel defeated. So we
Yeah,
might put it down and say, "I'm done with it," but our
yeah,
mind is like, "No, no, 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 no," and so we come right back to it, right?
yeah,
So it's okay to be difficult sometimes. Difficulties
yeah,
in life keeps us moving,
yeah,
right? No,
absolutely.
no matter how you cut that pie, that's how it is. You have
Mm.
rebellious kids that keeps you grounded because it keeps you on your
Oh, yeah.
toes. Now,
Oh,
because
yeah.
no parent, no good parent want to see their kid fail. So it
No.
keeps you grounded in the sense that like, wow, this is real hard, but I don't want to see them fail, or I want them to live a better life than me. So it
Yeah,
motivates you to keep applying yourself, and then your
yeah.
kids grow up and they see that. Just like I said earlier, like my mom, even when the world counted her out, I counted my mom out a couple times. Like she never gave up, right? So now I looked at
Mhm.
it like if she can do it, I can do it, right?
Uh-huh.
So we are representations for our kids.
Yep.
Everything's built on perception. So whatever you put out there in the universe is what you're gonna get back, and
100%.
and that's
Yep.
it.
Yep.
So
And I think that during that time, I think I finally, as when I had my first daughter, I think that was a big turnaround for me on starting to kind of have a different mind shift about God, because
right,
then I realized that I had this precious little life myself, that it was my duty to try to raise her in a way
mm-hmm,
that brought her to Christ, and that she had that education, that she knew who he was. She knew how to get to him. She knew,
mm-hmm,
all of these things, and had that foundation, because if if she, because I've always kind of felt, I kind of felt this is at least how I felt about it. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, but this is what was on my heart, at least, you know, was that if she didn't accept God, accept Jesus as an adult, and something happened to her, and it was because I had never even so much as tried to introduce this or tried to teach it to her, then that's on my soul, you know, that because God gave her to me and I dropped the ball. I didn't care about what the gift he gave to me. And I
Right.
was, you know, enough. But if I at least, you know, I gave her the tools, I gave her the information, I gave her all of this stuff and tried to guide her and lead her in that direction, then what she did is I did my part. I did what I was supposed to do, you know, and at that point in time too, I think is where I started realizing that I kind of started understanding a little bit more about the idea of how these bad things happen because God gave us free will, you know, and we'd all be a little pissed off if we didn't have free will and we were being moved around as just pawns, right? Like everybody be all ticked off then about that too, you know, but then we have free will and then we're all mad because bad things happen. Well, you can't have it both ways.
No.
You know, there's sin in the world, so it's either you don't have free will, so then no bad things can happen, or you have free will and have to accept the fact that bad things are going to happen sometimes.
Right.
And it's
Right.
part of life. So that's where I had to come to the idea that, you know, with even my daughter on that, and that was kind of where I came to that, was that like, okay, I do everything that I can while she's a child to lead her to God, lead her to Christ, and teach her and everything. And then after that, it's free will.
Right.
You know, she has to make her decisions and make her choices. And whatever happens, happens, you know? And that's her. And I guess that's when I started realizing that, like, okay, well, I'm her parent, but I can't sit there and like just hog tie her and throw her in a closet and make sure that, you know, she never makes a bad choice. Right.
Right.
And it's kind of the same thing. Like God can't just sit there and like, I mean, he could, but he's not going to just sit there and take all of us and just, you know, tie us up and throw us in the closet so we can't make bad decisions. Right. So, you know,
I mean, that's the according to Genesis in the Bible, at one point life was linear, what life was perfect. But you know, Adam and Eve, they created the sin, and now we live and we learn it, because you know it's from Adam and Eve is why we have free will. You know,
right.
so you
Yeah.
know it's just life lessons. That's all. God, it's almost like it's I don't want to say a game because that sounds crazy. It's to equate
I
God
get
in
you,
games, but
though. Yeah.
it's almost like he designed this perfect world, and he says, "I'm gonna give free will to see what you do with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
See if you follow my law or you
Mm-hmm.
rebel against it." So and that's what it is at the end of the day. I mean, I just started my spiritual journey like 2 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I grew up in the church on my father's side of the family, but like you know, it was a forced thing, and I said I would never return to the church. But you know, it's crazy how God operates. Always said I would never have stepped foot in the church. I'm not going to church. And
Mm-hmm.
Rodney, he was in the comments earlier. One thing Rodney likes to say on the podcast all the time is don't tell God what you're not going to do. And now that I'm going to church, I'm
Yes.
starting to see that. I'm starting to see
Mm-hmm.
that. And now that I'm walking this walk, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm being a believer and I'm going to church, I'm starting to see how a lot of things in life is starting to align itself. Like you was just saying, like I was just talking the past couple of days about how parents should be with their children the last 2 days, you know. And I've put out scriptures and stuff, and see how you just mentioned it. It's just funny how things align like that. I was just talking about that. Now,
Yeah.
God's just reaffirming that thought process, that notion through you, because you just
Mm-hmm.
mentioned it. So it's clear, and it's a lot of things, messages that people try to convey to me, or I try to convey to others, that is coming full circle, and it's just in the forefront now. It's more
Yeah.
pronounced. Like I'm starting to see it a little bit more. So it's good. It's good.
Yeah.
And like I said, ever since I started this journey, things have been in an upward trajectory for me. It's been positive, and everything's been turning around for me. I had a
Yeah.
lot of negativity. I had dark times, and now that black cloud has drifted away. So
Yeah.
I'm like, I like that feeling. I like to look up and see the sun and the
Mhm.
clouds. I don't want that cloud no more. So I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
gonna stay away from those evil
Yeah.
entities, and I want all positivity. So I pump nothing but positivity. I like to pour into others. And
Yeah.
it'd be times where I might get upset with somebody. I turn back around, even if I don't really care for them, and I apologize, because
Mhm.
I can't be the pot calling the kettle black. I can't be a walking contradiction. If I'm gonna say I'm a positive person and I'm all about positivity, well, even if I go against that, I have to fix it. I have to correct it. So, and that's what I do now. So, and
Yeah.
with that, I've noticed I get a lot more respect. Right, it's
Mhm.
reciprocated, and I
Yes.
love that feeling
Yes.
that I've been getting. So it's good.
Absolutely. Yeah. My mom used to tell me that, she's like, God will sit there and try to tell you, kind of direct you and give you little whispers and tell you, where to go, what he wants you to do. And, he'll start with kind of like whispering to you. Then he's going to like tap you on the shoulder because you didn't listen. And then he's kind of going
Yeah,
to sit there and kind of like go like, hey, listen, you
yeah,
didn't, he kind of gets a little bit more, and then finally you don't listen. He's just going to drop that anvil on your head and be like, I said, do
yep,
this,
yep.
and the, and it's, and then she related that back because she took care of her uncle. He was a Vietnam vet, and he had a lot of PTSD and a lot of stuff like that that came from there. And she took care of him in his last years because he ended up with lung cancer. And boy, that man, after he came out of Vietnam, he was about as much against the idea of believing in God as you could be. And he saw too many things, he did too many things. It was a really, really bad time for him, and he was just an angry man, and I remember him being that way too. And through that time when he got lung cancer, he was struggling a lot, and that it was a really, he did not do, I mean, nobody does well with cancer, but I mean, he really wasn't doing great with it. And during that time, just before he passed away, he started saying that he's like, I had nobody in my life. He's like, but to take care of me, to help me. He's like, but he's like, Cheryl, he's like, you were here, and he's like, you were my angel. And he's like, I know that God put you with me. God sent you to me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And because of my mom being there for him and staying there with him, and she'd talk about God and she'd pray for him, and she, things like that. And him getting knocked down so hard with cancer, and then having my mom there with him to take care of him, and like he couldn't push her away. He couldn't like, get rid of her per se, I guess.
Right.
He came around to believing in God again. And before he died, he had her pray with him to be saved and ask God for forgiveness and all of these things, just not long before he died. And my mom kind of told me, she's like, that's kind of some of what I've meant. She's like, God had tried to talk to him for a long, long time. She's like, and he's stubborn. you know,
Mm-hmm.
you know. She's like, but that anvil for him was his cancer, because without that happening, he, more than likely, the way that he was going, he never would have came back around to God.
Right.
You
I
know,
mean,
with
and sometimes it seems morbid, and sometimes it might sound crazy to look at things like that, but that's exactly what it is. Like sometimes when people pass, it's going to be hurtful to us, but what happens 9 times out of 10 is it brings the family closer. Well, it might
mm-hmm,
be family that was estranged, like
mm-hmm,
that drifted apart. But something like a family illness or death in the family might bring two people together that should have been
yeah,
together a long time ago. So that's
yeah,
the one positive that you can take from that. That's why I said earlier, in every lesson, there's a lesson
yeah,
in life.
Yep.
So it's the little subtleties in life that that tends to go unnoticed, right? But
Mm-hmm.
when things happen, then we start to realize stuff
Mm-hmm.
start to click for us. We're like, oh, okay, now I
Yeah.
see it, right? So just imagine if we take that time each day for self reflection, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or like decompression time, and just think about things and absorb things, and then just meditate on things, and yeah, you'll start seeing things in a different light, right? Through a different lens. So that's
Yeah. Yeah, I used to have I talked about this on one of my podcast episodes a few weeks back, and we were talking about mindset and how you have to kind of like train yourself to have, positive mindsets, because we drift as humans, we so easily drift into the negative and find the negative, in
right.
things more than the positive. Um, and I was talking about how, about, even like 15 years ago, I would still kind of have this really negative mindset. Like I would find things, like it would be like I'd be upset over things so easily, so fast, and I'd find something bad in like everything. you know
Mm,
um Not that I wasn't there trying to help people, but just like I would always be like, oh my gosh, this happened or that happened, or whatever. And Facebook was starting to be more prevalent, I think, around that time. People were using it a lot more. And I was going through it, and I just kept seeing people like they'd keep putting up there like what was it, FLM or FML or whatever it was, F my life, F my
yeah.
life. And then you would sit there and you would see it was like my tire got flat, or my tire was flat
Yeah,
when I
it's like
went.
that's what you're mad about.
I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, like I could sit there and see like, ah, man, of course today started this way, or whatever. But to sit there and say F my life, like,
Yeah,
I mean, I feel like that's such strong verbiage
right, right,
for that, and you would
right,
see them. It was like, oh, my son spilled his cereal this morning. F my life. He,
yeah,
or this, that, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, so then I sat there and I was kind of like, okay, it started making me kind of reflect a little bit. And then we had a really close family friend of ours. Her daughter got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And when it was like, oh my gosh, I'm like, that's one of those diseases that it's not like type 2. Type 1 is different, and like this mom had to literally quit working because she was having to get up like every hour, every couple of hours to go test her daughter's blood sugar in the middle of the night to make sure that it wasn't dropping too low, and she was just going to wake up to her daughter dead in the morning, you
right,
know? And so I'm like, okay, I'm like, that is something that you could say F my life, about maybe,
right,
not
right,
the flat tire you or the spilled cereal, you know?
right,
And then I sat there and I just started kind of thinking, I'm like, you know what? Really, these things just aren't that bad. My
right,
kids, I don't have to wake up every night wondering whether or not they're going to be gone in the morning.
right.
I don't have to worry about that. And I decided at that point in time that every time that I had a negative thought, I had to, and I would try to intentionally catch myself, I would have to find two positive things in place of it to think about. Like even
Mm,
if it's just a statement, just like a positive statement of any kind, I would have to give
right.
myself two of those to every time I thought about one negative thing. And
Mm,
every day, by the end of the day, I had to have noticed one positive thing throughout the day. At least, even so, sit there and say, this was the good thing about today.
right.
And sometimes I remember one day I was struggling that day. I don't even know why. I can't even tell you because it probably wasn't even that bad. It was just
Right.
I was struggling that day, and I was crying. And I'm just like, this is just the worst day ever. And it's just awful. And I couldn't think of a positive thing to counter my terrible, awful day with. And, I'm bawling on the couch. And I'm like, okay, I have to think of a positive thing, and I can't think of anything, like, like nothing. And just to go and like put this, like, I am not a person that has a bad life. Even then, I could
Right.
not think of a positive thing at all in that moment. And I sat there and I looked out the window, and there was this butterfly that flew by. This little monarch butterfly flew by and landed on this honeysuckle that we had planted out in front of our window. And it just sat there, and it was just like, flapping its little wings, taking a break. And I was like, I was so desperate to try to find a positive that day because I was running out of time. My daylight was going down, like,
Right.
and I was bawling, and I sat there and I said, I was really lucky to see that really pretty butterfly today. It was just like, it was, but that was the thing. And it was like, I had to try to find something positive. And that was like at the beginning of my journey, of really trying to really find that positivity every day, that positive thing. So
Gotcha.
there were days I was reaching, okay.
Gotcha.
But
Gotcha.
it was, and that was that. And so I think like our journeys have to start like that. And you got to try to like make, it goes back to us talking about even in the very, very beginning of this conversation earlier about being very intentional with our time
Right.
and our
Mm-hmm.
thoughts, and it goes to just being very intentional about what you're choosing to think about, what you're choosing to let your mind drift off to, what you're allowing into your mind, and, choose to be positive, choose to put positivity out there, choose to see the good in the world and not live in that negativity all the time. So,
Got you. So any final words you want to leave for the viewers, as far that for people that may be going through a tough time or struggling, any message or advice you want to give?
yeah, I mean, it'll get better every, with the struggles, it gets better. But I think the biggest thing is, I think when you're struggling, and I think when things are hard, be that beauty that you want to see out there. Whatever it is that you're missing, whatever it is that you're wishing you had, just become it for other people, and I think that you really just start seeing your life change when you start becoming that for other people, and not try to focus so much on trying to just get for yourself. But I think I heard somebody say, in another show that I had done, you you know you, you keep what you have by giving it away,
Mm,
you
I
know
like that.
and so instead of trying just to figure out how to get more, just start giving it to others, whether that's your
Paying it
time
forward.
or positivity. Pay it forward, and
Mm,
it'll all come back.
got you.
So
I definitely appreciate you, Brooke. You're more than welcome to come back anytime.
well, thank you.
That's gonna that's gonna conclude today's episode. We hope the viewers got something from this. Was entertained. Got a little wisdom. Gained a little knowledge. Continue to like, share, comment, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel.
Great.
Greatly appreciate it. But Brooke, enjoy the rest of your night, and we'll stay in touch.
All right, sounds great. Thank you for having me.
No problem.
Good night.